This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 13th of July 2022 at home in Wicklow. And it is an episode about two movies, largely, and amour fou, which is the French for crazy love, basically. The two films I'm going to discuss are from 1986, Betty Blue, the French movie, which in France is known as 37.2 degrees in the morning, and from 1958, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, both of which came across my consciousness this week over a couple of days, and I found myself wondering why these two movies. And Betty Blue came to me out of the blue while I was doing a particular kind of work, and I was trying to work out the connective tissue, and I came to a pretty daft conclusion, which I'll share with you in the episode as you continue to listen. So that is what's coming up. Movies, crazy love, obsession, warped minds, and probably an argument for engaging the critical brain and really resisting broad brushstroke interpretations of movies, and resisting in particular condemnatory criticism, such as the type that seems very prevalent at the moment across woke culture and the culture wars and identity politics and all of that. So there you go. That is what's coming up. I really hope you enjoy what you hear. And if you don't, just don't tell anybody about it. Just keep it to yourselves, okay? All right, I'll see you around the corner. Cheers!
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. Welcome. How are you today? How's it going? Are you hot and sweaty? Is that a bit rude? Is that a bit inappropriate? The sun has been shining of late, and I was tempted to launch into a Hamlet speech there for a millisecond, and I just thought how unbearable that would be. Maybe some other time I can find an excuse. I can contrive an excuse to shoehorn in some Hamlet me be. The sun has been shining. We finally have been enjoying a little bit of summer weather. How lovely. And I'm finally enjoying a spell of renewed good health after about 2 months, I guess. We had a bit of an old shindig, an old gathering here at #blessed at the weekend, and I had great plans. I had great plans to sing a song for my wife, because it was a sort of a belated birthday celebration for a significant birthday that we observed during lockdown last year. She was co-celebrating with a friend. Hi Anne-Marie, if you're listening. Hi Mark, because I know you are listening. Fair play to you. I'm going to return to Anne-Marie and Mark later in the tell. But I had great intentions to commandeer the microphone at this gathering and sing a soppy love song to my wife. But I wasn't feeling well enough. So I had to feebly and pathetically remain off stage and abandon my romantic vision. Oh well, another time perhaps, another time. not to worry. A good time was had by many, if not all. So that was nice. That was nice. But I'm telling you, it feels great to be feeling well again. Touch wood. I'll just tap myself on the head. Yeah, the energy's back. The body seems to have just settled into something. And I mean, this is recent. This is only in the last 2 or 3 days. So maybe I'm jinxing myself. But I believe I was enduring some rotten post-COVID symptoms in bizarre places. Anyway, enough of all that. How boring to be whinging about COVID symptoms. But look, it does appear to be on the rise again. I have been using the word rampant. COVID is rampant again. Lots of people are going down, and it's crap. It's just so bloody frustrating. Yeah. And look, it's something people are talking about. I'm seeing it in in social media. I noticed Blind Boy, whose podcast I rate very highly. I noticed he's just done his latest episode of his own podcast is about post-COVID stress or anxiety. I can't remember how he phrased it, but he's certainly having a good look at it. I haven't listened to it yet myself, but I mean, he's a guy who's very tuned into mental health and the larger patterns of what's going on in society and how they may impact one's mental stability and mental resilience. He's really good on that stuff, and always worth listening to. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone in having a whinge in this area, and certainly that was one of the reasons I started this podcast just over a year ago. I thought we're entering a time of sort of reframing and re-understanding where we are in the world after a couple of years of pretty much non-stop stress, social compromise, anxiety, unwellness, and grief, real grief for many people, and grief of lesser intensity for many others of us, and maybe a form of grief that we don't really articulate, like the loss of natural social interaction. And it depends. I mean, I know on some level, and on a significant level, I'm quite comfortable in my own company. Otherwise, I probably couldn't do something like this. I'm quite happy to noodle away on my projects and my creative endeavours, and a lot of that is solo time, and I enjoy being locked away in a room. I enjoy the isolation, and so there was an aspect of lockdown conditions that certainly fit quite well with my own natural inclinations, and I know at least one of my aunts expressed that she felt that way about it too. But that is not to disregard the other side of it, and the cost and the social cost. And I think a lot of people are learning how to behave again, and learning how to be in company again. And there's still that funny dance a lot of us do when we meet each other in person of, what are we doing? Are we hugging? Are we kissing? Are we fist bumping? Are we side hip bumping like a little disco boogie? Are we not touching at all? Are we keeping distance? And I experienced all of those options at our little gathering at the weekend. So it's an ongoing thing, an ongoing negotiation, and typically in Ireland, we generally trivialize it and make jokes about it because that's a very comfortable place for us to go. But I think there are going to be continuing after effects, emotionally, psychologically, and emotional and psychological stuff can impact our physical well-being as well. And so, yeah, that was a point I was going to make there, was that when I started the podcast, I was thinking I want to put something out there that is positive. I want to have something that people can listen to once a week if they're that keen, or just select an old episode or whatever and go, that was something that elevated my mood. That was something that amused me, diverted me, gave me a little lift. And I'd like to think that I've remained consistent in pitching to that area, even though I do often go into areas of discussion that can be quite serious and sometimes even confronting. Witness the last two episodes, the interview with Aisling Cregan, for which I've had quite a bit of really nice feedback actually from people. They seem to really respond well to the conversation I had with Aisling and how we got into her story, which is one of surviving abuse and trauma and all of that. And of course, don't forget, Aisling is out there promoting her fantastic book, I Am Someone, and I do recommend you go and give that a read if you can get your hands on it. It's out there in bookshops and libraries, wherever you are, and can be got online, of course, if it's not physically gettable in your vicinity. Anyway, there you go. So, I've been doing some demolition. It's not a metaphor. I haven't been taking a wrecking ball to things. No, but I've been swinging hammers and whacking things and using drills and kangos and things like that. I've been ripping out ceilings and knocking down walls. This is a bit of summer work that has come my way, and it has been most welcome indeed. Always good to get into something like that, get into something very physical, because let's not forget, the physical is often the pathway to mindfulness. The physical is often the pathway to take us out of our heads and into our bodies, and to follow our senses. That can be the pathway to mindfulness. What am I feeling? What am I holding? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What's that part of my body doing? What's this part of my body doing? Where am I? What can I feel inside myself? Let's just be here now. It's a nice objective, it's a nice pursuit, and it's not something we can do 24 hours a day. But when we can achieve it, it brings a quality of presence that I think is desirable and beneficial. Anyway, the other day, I was taking down, it's not finished yet, but I was taking down a red brick chimney, brick by brick, breaking through mortar, loosening the bricks, taking out the bricks one by one, saving what bricks could be saved, getting rid of the bits that couldn't be. And I was doing that methodically on a scaffolding inside an old cottage. And the film Betty Blue came into my head. Do you remember that film, Betty Blue? French film from 1986. The French don't know it as Betty Blue. They know it as 37.2 degrees in the morning, which would be, and I don't know how to say degrees or how that's expressed in French. So it might be something like 37.2 le matin. Ah ouais, j'aime beaucoup 37.2 le matin. Beatrice Dalle, elle est extraordinaire, n'est-ce pas? Maybe that's how they talk about the rather what? Pornographic? Was it pornographic? Is it pornographic? I don't know. I do remember, and listen, I have no idea why, when I was taking down a chimney, demolishing a chimney, brick by brick. That film, of all films, should come in my head. But it did. I was like, why is this movie come in my head when I'm doing this? I don't remember any chimneys in Betty Blue. I don't remember any demolition in Betty Blue. Manual labour. There's painting. There's painting beach houses in Betty Blue. I remembered that. So I felt compelled. I felt compelled to rewatch Betty Blue. So I did. Now, before I rewatched it, let me just clarify. Betty Blue, and seeing Betty Blue when I did, now let me see, it came out in 86, so I was 12. I didn't watch it when I was 12. That would have been inappropriate. I think I was more like 18 or 19, that sort of age. And it did have a massive impact on me. And I remember just watching the opening moments of the movie, which is fundamentally an extended lovemaking scene between the two leads, Beatrice Dalle and Jean-Hugues Anglade. Now, Jean-Hugues Anglade has been a fixture throughout French movies and prominent French movies throughout his career. I think at the time of Betty Blue he was 30 or 31, and Beatrice Dalle, it was her sort of breakout role. She was only around 21 or 22 when she made it, and it's probably the high point of her career, even though she's continued to make movies. But it was so sexually explicit and so sexually frank that I remember sitting up and taking notice and going, oh, this is like, my feeling was, we're not in Hollywood anymore. This is a very adult movie, and whatever about the titillation or the voyeuristic pleasure of watching these two French bodies, these young French bodies in the sex act. And certainly I don't think it's a coincidence that the movie starts with that, because there's a sexual obsession or a sexual magnetism and a sexual passion that is very much a driving force of the narrative. And certainly Beatrice Dalle's innate sexuality, or the sexuality that was captured by the director, whose name I think Jean-Jacques Benenix. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. And it was, if you read criticism, and I mean film criticism, I mean of the movie, reviews of the movie at the time, and subsequently, I think the movie is regarded as being of a group of French movies that were, visually very striking and very beautiful to look at, but maybe lacked substance. That they were a little bit empty, a little bit vacuous, and certainly movies from the great French pop stylist Luc Besson fell into that category as well, particularly something like The Big Blue, or as they call it in France, La Grande Bleue. I don't even know if they do call it Le Grand Bleu, because it was a very international success, The Big Blue, about the free divers. And I remember that was a favourite of mine and friends of mine in the early 90s. But this, Betty Blue came before that, and it does have some striking visuals in it. And yet, ultimately, it is a movie. It's a movie of what they call amour fou, crazy love. Now, amour fou, I guess, it's a genre of its own. It's love gone wrong. It's love driven by mania, or love derailed by obsession. But it's not slow burn. It's high octane obsession. Now, Beatrice Dahl's character, Betty Blue, sort of so memorably fixed in the movie poster, which is a beautiful sort of blue, predominantly blue poster, with her at the center of it, looking wistfully into the distance with a huge, luscious sort of pout on her face, and it fades to sort of, depending on the poster, it fades to yellow underneath. And my memory of the movie was it was predominantly set at the beach. Now, I watched it just the other night, and I watched the director's cut, which is 3 hours long. And I think the beach sequences are finished by about 30 or 35 minutes into the movie. And I was like, is that it? Is that all there was of the beach? Because basically the Jean-Hugues Anglade character was like the caretaker, handyman at the beach, who worked for this obnoxiously repellent slob of a sleazy owner, who, comes to sort of harass the Anglade character, and then is just staring lasciviously at Betty, and he's just gross. And this is and what that does is, the introduction of that character, it forces one of the main tensions in the story, which is that the Anglade character, whose name bizarrely is Zorg, that's Z-O-R-G, the Anglade character, he just kind of wants an easy life. He just wants to sort of, have his beers, live by the beach, do a bit of work, and then he finds this extraordinary sex pot in the body of Beatrice Dahl, and he's utterly smitten. Now, of course, you can argue that it's all about the sex. It's all about the objectification of Betty, and certainly the objectification of Beatrice Dahl, who many nude shots and explicit shots of her featured throughout the movie. Although that said, Jean-Hugues Anglade parades through the movie fully naked, full frontal, many, many times. But again, it's that very frank French camera looking at it. It's just so casual, which leads me to sort of argue, yeah, grand, they're having sex, whatever. They're nude, again, whatever. And it's not particularly prurient. Again, apart from that opening sequence where the camera is just very, very slowly zooming in on them in the middle of their lovemaking. And then we get the Anglade character's Zorg's voiceover saying, I'd only met Betty a week ago. But the landlord, the boss, his introduction forces the dynamics of the couple to the fore, because as I was saying, Zorg just wants an easy life. Let me be here with my girl, I'll do my bit of maintenance, my bit of painting, and he's not naturally fiery. He's not someone who's inclined to fight back. He lets his boss be incredibly presumptuous and arrogant and patronizing, but Betty doesn't roll that way, and she is impulsive, she's explosive, and she is utterly unafraid to be confrontational. And that side of her personality becomes more and more prominent as the movie goes on and as the story unfolds. And that's the foo, that's the madness, that's the craziness, and it intensifies as the story goes on. Now, the couple leave the beach. Now, I know now, I can look back and go, I think the reason that the beach scenes loomed so large in my mind was probably because of the impact of the sex scenes on my 17, 18, 19-year-old brain. And I would have been just compelled and utterly seduced by what was put in front of me. And so my memory was like, oh yeah, Betty Blue, it's just that amazing, that movie of, crazy passionate love on the beach. But no, as I found out when I rewatched it the other night, there's another 2.5 hours. Now, I had remembered how the movie ends. And again, this is 1986, so I'm going to be spoiling this. But there's a whole sequence that takes place in Paris where Betty catches up with an old friend of hers who runs an unsuccessful hotel, but then her friend meets a very successful restaurateur who has money, and it becomes like the four of them together, and they're great kind of drinking pals, and there's a great natural chemistry between the four of them. But you know, their situation gets derailed by another impulsive outburst by Betty, who takes offence to a snotty customer who she stabs with a fork. And so it's, you know, everything's put under pressure again. Now, part of the plot is also that the young Glad character is a writer, and he's written a novel that Betty discovers in the form of about 20 notebooks, handwritten notebooks, while she's having a tantrum and throwing everything out of their beach hut. She's like, "What's this?" And she's like, "Oh, are these all in sequence? Is this something?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's something I've written." And she reads it with a childlike obsession. And again, one of the complaints about Betty Blue is how Beatrice Dahl is portrayed, how Betty is portrayed as this sort of a childlike sex kitten who is completely driven by her whims, her caprices. And I suppose the argument is she's not then a fully fleshed out character. She's reduced to sex and to emotion, and then the film can be accused of a certain misogynistic reading. Now, look, I don't know. I don't come away from that movie, which I think it's not a perfect movie by any means. And certainly the director's cut is maybe way longer than it needs to be, and there's probably also an over simplistic view of mental unwellness, because ultimately that's where the story goes, is that Betty, having thought she was pregnant and then found out that she wasn't pregnant, she goes into a state of deep depression and into rages of self-harm. And towards the end of the movie, when Zorg visits her in the local hospital, and by this stage they've moved down to the south of France, the white-coated, bespectacled doctor is explaining to Zorg that, "Okay, I just have to tell you that Betty is in shock. Do you know what that means? She is totally insane." And I mean, I was watching going, really? That's a big jump. She'll never be sane again. And they're presenting it with enormous seriousness. Like, this is one of the worst mental health diagnoses that could ever be handed over to somebody. Now, Betty has, by that stage of the movie, enacted an act of terrible self-harm, and is basically in a catatonic state because of sedation in the hospital bed. And ultimately, Zorg decides to, and largely informed by the diagnosis of the doctor, he decides that the only way to say goodbye to Betty is to end her life by smothering her with a pillow. And then the final scene of the movie is Zorg sitting in his house writing his new novel. Now, you hear that and you go, "Oh my goodness, what the hell?" Now, the movie's based on a book, so maybe we shouldn't blame the movie and blame the guy who wrote the book. So there's something very unsatisfying about that sort of denouement and how the narrative is brought to a conclusion. That the only way to handle this chaotic, disturbed, highly hypersexualized woman who can't find a way back to an even keel after losing a pregnancy is for her boyfriend, is it for either the hospital to sedate her into catatonia and decide that she's completely bananas, insane and incurable, and then the boyfriend goes, well, there's only one thing for it, I'll smother her. That is problematic. I mean, there's no other way to look at that. That's like, are you serious, lads? And then the boyfriend finishes in that very, casually, French way, smoking his cigarette and writing the next chapter of his novel. It's really quite bizarre, but there's a lot of nice stuff in the middle. There's a quirky shopkeeper in the town where they fetch up, who's like a less antic Danny Kaye, and he's sort of quite tightly wound and slightly effeminate, but he has this sex-starved wife who throws herself at the Zorg character in one of the more ridiculous scenes in the movie. There's an attempted rescue scene of that couple's son who's locked himself in the bathroom and is filling the bath with bath toys, a little bit like Paddington in the Paddington movies of recent years. And Zorg gets in through the outside, upstairs window and opens the door, and the father comes in and grabs the son and hangs him on a hook by the back of his dungarees in the bathroom, suspended there on the wall. The son's just sort of nonplussed. Little things like that are kind of funny. They're visually funny, and there's lots of lovely visuals, and the colour palette is really beautiful at places. A beautiful old yellow Mercedes features prominently in that latter part of the movie. And Jean-Hughes Anglade and Beatrice Dalle, there is a real chemistry. The director claims that they didn't even, at a certain point, maybe they weren't even sure they were in a movie anymore because their chemistry was so intense. But it is well acted, and I was happy to revisit it, and I'm not sure if I feel a need to watch it again. But there are some funny tonal shifts in it. There's a lot of comedy in it. And maybe the more dramatic stuff is less well handled, and certainly the end is, I found myself recoiling from the screen a bit, going, "Oh my God, I didn't remember how badly this was written, and how clunky and overly simplistic, and maybe a throwback to certain ideas around women and hysteria and women's hormones and women being emotionally unhinged, but quite simply, but that's something that that's something that can't be addressed. It's just their nature. Of course, that's incredibly patronizing, reductive, simplistic, and fundamentally stupid, uninformed, moronic. Does all of that feed into then a misogyny that is really more a definition of laziness, more a definition of a lack of interest, and certainly in terms of the writer of the book and then the script adaptation, is there a lack of interest in going, hold on, let's understand this with a bit more complexity. And Betty's descent into, I don't want to say madness, because I don't view it that way. She's an incredibly impulsive character, and I feel like I knew women like that, and I knew guys like that. And I think when I find myself resisting the out and out misogynistic analysis, I often find myself coming back to the point. There's two things to think about here. One is It's one story. When I watch that movie, when I watch Betty Blue, and let's go back, and I watched it when I was, obviously a lot younger as well, I didn't come away from that movie going, wow, let's not even say all women, all French women are crazy about sex, and they're also crazy. And they self-harm when things don't go their way in life. When life events go against them, they're really dangerously volatile. And alongside them, French men love the sex and are happy to go on the journey, the up and down, unpredictable journey of madness. But they're sort of, meek and ineffectual and, well, there was nothing I could do, but I truly love her. Now, look, that said, I mean, Zorg and Betty, like, they're very dedicated to each other. Now, but I didn't come away from that movie as an 18-year-old, and now 30 years later as a 48-year-old, going, all women are nuts. See, that's when I kind of resist the misogynistic, just this kind of large brush stroke of, oh, well, it's fundamentally misogynistic. I mean, I don't think that's true for this movie. I think Betty is actually an incredibly strong character and takes control of Zorg's life and gets his, types up his manuscript and sends it out to publishers, and she's the one who's pursuing his dream and being aggressive and demonstrating faith and demonstrating being proactive and sticking up for them and standing up for herself, and being unafraid to express her disappointment or her frustration or her rage. They're all positive things. Now, when it goes to excess, that's of course what brings in the specificity of her character. And I go, oh, wow, yeah, that's her character. And I don't know, I mean, you go and watch it for yourself and see what you think. Either the original release, I mean, the director's cut is an extra hour. There's an extra hour of stuff in there. And I think largely it's the extra hour is towards the sort of middle and latter part of the movie, and it sort of fleshes out the relationship. It fleshes out Betty's journey towards the end. But listen, what it got me thinking about then was, okay, so is it a story about obsession? Like, she's obsessed with his success. She's obsessed with him becoming a successful writer. He's not obsessive. Although I think rewatching it, it's clear that the sexual potency of the relationship is certainly a huge thing for him and his character. And even when he's expressing his love and his affection, he very often fondles her breasts while he's expressing his love. But I mean, they're young. I mean, doesn't that change? Would they still be doing that 10, 20 years later? I don't know. But that is it's certainly, I think, as I watched, I felt, okay, well, that's a huge part of the glue in the relationship. And I'm going to return to this idea, okay? Now, so Betty Blue just popped in my head while I was taking down that chimney. Now, a friend came to visit yesterday. Hi, Anne-Marie again. Hello, Mark, again, if you're listening. And Anne-Marie was sitting down having a cup of tea with us, and she said, myself and Mark were watching a movie the other night, and Jesus, it was one of those classics, and oh God, it was terrible. And I was immediately intrigued. I was like, oh, what go on, I can't remember the name, but what was it? I can't remember anything about it. It was that bad. It was so shit. And I was like, tell me anything you remember about it. And she said, I don't know. It had like towers. And I said, was it Vertigo? She said, yeah, it was Vertigo. And she said, you're probably going to tell me it's a great film. And I said, yeah, it is. I said, no, she was being totally dismissive. And she's going, it just didn't make any sense. And I was going, yeah, I think it can be quite a confusing movie, all right. And it's certainly, a lot of critics responded to it that way when it first came out in 1958. But Vertigo, I thought, okay, is Vertigo, would Vertigo be not a bad double bill, a double feature with Betty Blue? Is Vertigo also an iteration of amour fou, crazy love, mad love caught in the snare of madness, a love of entanglement, a love of unstoppable but doomed attraction, and love which is about what? Thwarted agency. Love that is about an attempt to control. Now, when I was speaking to Anne-Marie, one of the first things I said, well, Hitchcock was a pretty dark character, and his interests and obsessions were quite dark, and he was certainly... a lot of his narratives and a lot of his interests and a lot of his storytelling is caught up in the psychosexual and very twisted dynamics between men and women and love and obsession and voyeurism and objectification. And Hitchcock loved his blondes. Grace Kelly, one of the original Hitchcock girls, one of the original Hitchcock heroines. Certainly, in his American movies, because of course he had a long, a very established film career where he truly cut his teeth and found his form in England before making the move across to Hollywood. Something like 24 movies. He had Grace Kelly. He later had Tippi Hedren. And the blonde of choice in Vertigo is Kim Novak. And Kim Novak was an actress that certainly got my attention. I think from, I want to say, is she in Pal Joey? And is she also in The Man with the Golden Arm? Very different movies. Pal Joey, quite a light musical, and Man with the Golden Arm, quite a dark, edgy movie about a recovering heroin addict who is a jazz drummer. Machine, isn't it? Isn't that his name? Played by Frank Sinatra in one of his better performances. And I think she's the love interest in that. And is he also a card dealer as well as a drummer? But because of his heroin addiction, he can't quite get his drumming action back. It's a very, that's The Man with the Golden Arm. That's one that's worth checking out. A black and white, directed by Otto Preminger. Pretty tough, uncompromising director who had plenty of rows with his cast. Was it Robert Mitchum who punched him? I think he was quite a bullying, controlling director. What's the word? There's a word I'm trying to think of. Emigre, one of those guys who came out of wartime Germany, escaped during the war. Again, I've referred to others of those directors. Fritz Lang is another one, and they brought a lot of their baggage and their history and their obsessions. Which, I mean, what else is anyone going to do? What else is an artist going to do? Hitchcock, though. Hitchcock. So the psychosexual, and probably there is no other movie in the Hitchcock oeuvre. Let's keep with the French. There's probably no other movie in Hitchcock's oeuvre, his catalogue, that captures the psychosexual and the obsession of warped love than Vertigo. Like, Vertigo is the apex, I think, of this idea in Hitchcock's filmography. And if you haven't seen Vertigo, I heartily recommend it. It is trippy. It is disturbing. It is unnerving. It is visually one of Hitchcock's most striking movies. It has a great James Stewart performance at the heart of it. It's also a bit of a great San Francisco movie, if you like that city. But quite simply, and the way Hitchcock described it, and for a movie that is genuinely confusing and slippery and elusive, and there's a reason for all of that, Hitchcock described it very simply. Man finds girl. Man loses girl. Man finds girl again. Man loses girl again. That was Hitchcock's pithy synopsis of what the movie is about. The man in question is James Stewart. He is he a private detective or a retired police officer? And he is hired by a friend to follow the friend's wife, who the friend thinks has suicidal tendencies and has been acting strangely. The wife, the girl, is Kim Novak. And James Stewart's character, Scotty, who has vertigo, there's a very dramatic opening sequence in Vertigo where a colleague loses his life partly because of James Stewart's vertigo and inability to keep his head at heights. But James Stewart becomes obsessed with Kim Novak's character, and then she dies, and he is tormented with grief. But then, subsequently, he comes across another girl that bears a striking resemblance to the friend's wife, except now, instead of being blonde, she's a brunette. But he is absolutely taken by her resemblance to this woman who he had become obsessed with, and contrives to form a relationship with this girl. And then, and this is where things get very screwy and creepy and weird, basically tries to mold her and style her and remake her into the image of the original wife. And it's and then of course you can go, well, if that's not misogynistic, what else is? It's absolutely blatant objectification. It's all about the physical. It's let me make you into my dead, well, they weren't lovers, but I want to recreate you. I want you to be my living my living love mate, brought back from the dead. And in fact, Vertigo is also based on a book, just like Betty Blue. A lot of movies are. No news there. Stating the obvious once again on the Clear Out. Based on a French novel called D'entre les morts, which I think translates as From the Dead. D'entre les morts. So From the Dead. And so Vertigo. And of course, there's more slippery stuff in Vertigo. There is more slippery stuff. Who is this girl that looks so like the wife? Did the wife actually die? Was that the wife that Scotty actually saw? Or was it the same girl who's still alive now and she didn't actually die? And it was all an elaborate cover-up. Dun, dun, dun. So it's got a lot of that, the classic Hitchcock, tricky, convoluted plot as well. But the Vertigo, this is the thing. There's the Vertigo, what does it represent? What does it represent? And with Hitchcock, and so it's very Freudian, it's all sexual. Vertigo really is it's the fear of consummation. Is it the fear of the sex act? I don't want to go to that high place. I can't rise to the occasion. I can't rise to get the girl. And so one reading would have it that it's all about impotence, about male impotence. And the only way to conquer male impotence is to have absolute control over the girl and make sure no one else can have her. So there's a fear of, I don't want to be outperformed by other men. And so all of the scenes where Scotty has to come face to face with his vertigo are actually him coming face to face with his fear of the sex act, or his fear of being unable to perform. And every time he gets higher and higher, he gets dizzier and dizzier and more disturbed and deranged and sickened by the impending climax. There's an extraordinary little clip you can find on YouTube where there's a famous scene in the middle of the movie where Scotty, James Stewart's character, has finally achieved this transformation, and he's convinced this girl, the brunette, to have her hair dyed blonde. And he's waiting with great anticipation outside her apartment for her to return. And she does, and she's wearing the style of the deceased wife. And they go into her room, and he's unhappy straight away. She said, no, you know, your hair should be up. She used to wear it up. You shouldn't have your hair down. And the girl says, look, we tried it, it doesn't work. But he instinctively reaches out and pulls it up. And then she goes into her bedroom to put her hair up. Now, there's an extraordinary bit of audio you can find on YouTube where Hitchcock is explaining this to the French director Francois Truffaut via a translator. And he says basically, well, this is basically the girl. He's got her to come to bed, but she, with the hair down, he says that's like the girl coming to bed but refusing to take her knickers off. This is Hitchcock's word. These are Hitchcock's words. And so when she goes into the bedroom and puts her hair up and returns, that's her returning with her knickers down, ready for action. And it's in that scene in the movie, it's a darkened room, and there's a vivid use of green. There's a green glow that frames her initially, and then when she goes into the bedroom, James Stewart goes where she was. And he kneels down or squats down. It's almost like he's genuflecting before consummation. And this is famously, Vertigo uses intense shades of green and red in its color scheme, and people have tried to analyze what these things mean. Some say it represents deceit. The green is deceit, that the red is love, that the green is death. Red could be sex, of course. For me, when I see the green, I'm like, it's the sickening mind. It's the sickened mind. It's the diseased mind, and it's the diseased perception of James Stewart. As he's trying to control this young woman and turn her into someone who's dead. Hitchcock, in that same bit of audio, says what's really happening there, metaphorically, is the act of necrophilia, having sex with a dead person. But it's only when that girl comes out of the room with her hair up that the James Stewart character can actually achieve an erection. Again, Hitchcock's words. So again, the psychosexual, it's absolutely, it's a mental, crazy movie. And really, I think what's elevated it over the years, or what's led to its reappraisal, is that it's these themes, it's these tones, it's the color palette, it's the lighting design. And that design was greatly influenced by Saul Bass, who primarily is famous for his title sequences and his movie poster designs. And he did those for Hitchcock, North by Northwest famously. He did them for Vertigo. He designed the original poster for The Shining. If you look at a series like Mad Men, those designs would have been very influenced by Saul Bass. I think he also did the design, the title sequence for Anatomy of a Murder. another great thriller from around the same time. But he was very responsible for this colour palette that was used in the movie. The deep reds, the red light, the green light, red dresses, green dresses. There's a famous scene in a restaurant where Kim Novak, we first meet her, and she has that hair tied back. She's wearing a lovely green dress, but the wallpaper in this expensive looking restaurant is a kind of a deep red with floral print, and so flowers feature as a motif as well. And there's a famous nightmare sequence in the movie which uses animation, which was quite unusual in a live action suspense movie. But it's flower petals dissolving, and again, worth checking out, even if you're just going to go and be cheeky and do it the lazy way, do it the cheats way. Don't cheat, just watch the bloody movie. You can go and watch these clips on YouTube, no problem. But they're really, really, it's just so well worth checking out. And I found myself wondering, I was looking at one of those scenes myself, that love scene in that room. There's a neon sign outside the window which is throwing off that green light, and at different points different letters are indicated, and P was one of the letters. And before I'd heard Hitchcock talking about erections and impotence, or seeing that reading, I thought, well, is the P is it for penis? Is it for penetration? And then at a certain point you see MP, and it's like, is it male potency? Again, this is what you can do when you start analysing these movies. There's so many, and Vertigo is a movie that offers up so many interpretations. And as I say, it was the tone and the atmosphere and the palette and the sophistication and the layering of meaning that was going on that I think has ultimately led to its reappraisal, because it wasn't that well loved when it first came out in 1958, and critics were bemused and baffled and uninterested and just thought it just doesn't make any sense. And this is, I think I saw one quote that said, this is a Hitchcock and Bull story, which is quite cute. So anyway, there you go. There's two movies, right? Betty Blue and Vertigo. And sure, if you haven't seen Betty Blue, I think it's worth seeing, just to go, okay, this was 1986, and what am I looking at? What version of France am I looking at? It's still quite a stylish looking movie. It's still a beautifully staged movie in many moments, and that central relationship is ultimately, I think, quite endearing, thanks to the strength of the lead performances. And as I say, there's a lot of comedy in it as well. Vertigo, you've just heard me sing its praises and give a bit of a breakdown of what it might represent, and I've explained what Hitchcock said about it, certainly in that one of those key scenes. And again, I found myself going, okay, so what was the connection? What planted this in my head this week? Now, the Vertigo was just a coincidence. I think that was just serendipity that Anne-Marie came along and mentioned how crap she and Mark thought it was. And yeah, I continually name them because this is what's known as naming and shaming. Go and rewatch that movie. Go and reappraise it yourselves, guys. It's just a banger. It's fantastic. I love it. So that was just serendipity. Now, the Betty Blue thing, this is where I'm going to make my tenuous connection. So, as I said, Betty Blue, which I haven't thought about, spoken about, or watched in years. I'm not even sure if I'd seen it since the first time I'd seen it, until a couple of nights ago. It came in my head when I was taking down the chimney. The next movie that came into my life in this little time frame was Vertigo. What did I say Vertigo was about? One reading is it's about fear of sex, fear of consummation. One reading is it's about male impotence. And, you know, it's about control. It's about the loss of control. It's about losing someone you love. All of these things. And so I was just mulling it over there today, trying to find the connective tissue. And I was like, oh. So this chimney that I'm taking down, and I'll be back on that job tomorrow to begin working on the outside of the chimney. I'm actually going to be working on the chimney stack outside the house on the roof, taking it down brick by brick. I'm going to go to the very top. The chimney is a phallic symbol. The chimney is hot. The chimney is hard, and it's hard to take down. But I'm there taking it down brick by brick. So what's going on? I'm amusing myself here, guys. So, you know, don't anyone jump to any mad conclusions or project too much into my own personal narrative. But I'm like, okay, so is this a fear? Am I living out a fear of impotence? Am I living out some fear of the sex act? Am I taking apart my own sexuality, my own sexual potency, brick by brick? When this chimney is fully down, am I going to undergo some crisis of masculinity? I don't know. It's actually not very Hitchcockian. It's quite mundane and banal. We're talking about manual labor here. But yeah, that's what came in my head. And so but again, we're in Freudian territory here, where we're talking about the subconscious. And so is this what suggested Betty Blue to me earlier this week? The dismantling of the phallic symbol? Or I don't know. I mean, there's so many crazy, ludicrous, ridiculous ways you could take this. And I mean, I'm being facetious because I can't take any of this stuff seriously. But and it shouldn't be taken seriously, for God's sake. But you know, I did to take it back to the movies. We'll leave my dismantled chimney alone for the moment, thanks. But to go back to the movies for a second, I did find myself trying to just think about, and this was the other point I didn't get to make about Betty Blue, and the idea of, you know, of misogyny, because I was trying to think So generally speaking, I found myself just reflecting on depictions of mad women and mad sexualized women in movies, and of course because of censorship, because of the mores, the social mores of the time, because of what could and couldn't be shown on camera. We're talking about, you know, movies from the 70s on that became more sexually explicit and more sexually frank. And certainly, even though I said, watching Betty Blue as a younger man, one of my first reactions was we're not in Hollywood anymore. But of course there would have been movies in as part of the Hollywood new wave in the 70s that would have maybe strayed into this territory. Now, I've never seen it, and it's on my list. John Cassavetes, what's it called? Is it Woman on the Verge of a Breakdown? I'm gonna be cheeky and just quickly look it up here. while I'm talking. And that's Gina Rowlands, isn't it? Who was his wife. And isn't Peter Falk in that as a bit of a maybe not such a nice husband? And she's going through something. Let me just see if I can get that up here. I'll just, again, if you're, oh, come on, guys, help me out. John Cassavetes. There we go. Let's see. John Cassavetes, who of course was an actor as well as a great kind of indie director. Let me just find his filmography here. I think two of his most famous movies as an actor were probably The Dirty Dozen and Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby, of course, with Mia Farrow. A Woman Under the Influence. That's the movie I was thinking of. 1974. Yeah, Gina Rowlands, Peter Falk, exactly. And yeah, again, mental illness of wife and mother Mabel, who's loved by her husband Nick, but it's placing a strain on the marriage. I've never seen it, but it is considered a key text in American independent film, in serious, in terms of serious dramatic films about women's issues, about relationships, and yeah, it's just one of those movies that I've never got around to watching, but one that comes to mind talking about what we're talking about today. So yeah, I mean, another later movie, of course, around the same time as as he knocks the microphone, around the same time as Betty Blue was Fatal Attraction, which was, what year was that? I spoke about Fatal Attraction not too long ago, didn't I? 1987, a year later. And of course, Fatal Attraction gave us one of the all-time great female villains and female problematic characters in Glenn Close's Alex, who has this extramarital affair with Michael Douglas. She's single, he's not. So he's the cheat. But they have this night of wild passion while Michael Douglas's wife and daughter are away out of the city, and Glenn Close's character subsequently becomes, in fact, it's a weekend of passion, and she becomes obsessed with Michael Douglas, and it becomes a very extreme thriller, and you watch that movie. I defy you to tell me that Glenn Close is not a strong and compelling, that Glenn Close's character, like Glenn Close's portrayal of that character, doesn't give you a strong and compelling female character. But see, this is the problem. A lot of the misogyny maybe comes from the reading. How do we read the text? How do we consume that narrative? What do we walk away with? And you walk away from that movie. One could walk away from that movie, and maybe people did at the time walk away from that movie going, holy hell, again, another psycho woman. And no one's really too critical of, is it Nick? Is that his character? The Michael Douglas character? Who, he was the one who lapsed. He was the one who was unfaithful. And again, you don't have to watch films with this big moral compass. Is that why you watch? Is that why you watch movies? To get your morality checked. Sometimes movies can tap into that. Sometimes movies can be illustrative. Sometimes they can be provocative. But sometimes they're merely there to entertain. And sometimes they're merely there to be provocative in an entertaining way, to be thrilling in an entertaining way, to be titillating in an entertaining way. David Thompson, as I've mentioned before, the great English film critic, he absolutely leans into the idea that movies and cinemas, movie houses, make voyeurs of us all, and that we're all complicit in a certain pervy voyeurism. Now, I don't know. Maybe, do you want to throw that into gendered terms? Typical men, the male gaze. Listen, I defy you, if you're a woman, I defy you to tell me that you don't also look, that you can't also be a voyeur, that cinema is about showing us often, an awful lot of the time, cinema is about showing us beautiful people. Cinema is about showing us sex in many different forms. That form is movement, that form is passion, that form is music, and sometimes it is literally sex, yes, of course. But that form is design, that form is lighting, that form is, let's argue, Quentin Tarantino, for example. You don't watch Quentin Tarantino's movies for sex scenes. You're going to be very disappointed or disturbed if you do. But Quentin Tarantino, how about this for an argument? Quentin Tarantino's dialogue is the sex in Tarantino movies. Quentin Tarantino's staging of certain scenes, his ability to capture something so kinetically cool and striking that you almost salivate as you consume it, consume the visual spectacle. That is sex in Quentin Tarantino movies. So this is part of the dynamic of watching. This is part of the dynamic of being invited to take part and saying, yes, I want to take part. So you watch Betty Blue, you watch Vertigo, you watch something like Fatal Attraction, and you go, I'm going on the journey. I'm going on the journey. You've allowed me to bear witness. You're bringing me into these people's beds, into their bedrooms. You're bringing me into their showers. You're bringing me into their derangement. You're bringing me into their lust. You're bringing me into their obsession. You're bringing me into their degradation. You're bringing me into their inability to stay in control. You're bringing me into their messiness. You're bringing me into their volatility, their danger, their mutual destruction. You're making me complicit with Scotty, James Stewart, because we're being invited to look at Kim Novak in that way. We're being invited to stare at her face. One of the first things we see in the opening credits of Vertigo is a woman's mouth with lipstick on it. And again, the Freudian reading is the lipsticked mouth is meant to be evocative of female genitals. Now, again, Hitchcock, do you think that's an accident? Do you think that's an accident? The opening credits move from the mouth to the eyes, and the eyes are staring straight ahead at first, and then they're looking side to side, and then they widen in fear, and then I think it starts in black and white, but then when they go to fear, it's washed in red light. So what's red light? Red light is blood, red light is danger, red light is sex, desire, all of these things. So we're playing with powerful images, powerful stimuli. And if you haven't realised by now, this is part of the reason why I love movies and why I come back to them and why I won't hesitate to watch a movie again and again and again. Precisely because it stimulates these kinds of conversations that I'm having with myself. And by the way, if throughout this episode you've heard a bell in the background. That's because Ruby, the marketing assistant, the lovely Ruby, the kitten, well, she's a year old now, so I don't know if she's still a kitten, has been sleeping or trying to sleep on the windowsill behind me. So there you go. Now, maybe that's where we should leave it. I'm not sure if there was a concluding point to be made. Maybe I'll just reiterate that idea of, if there is a misogynistic take, a misogynistic reading that can be put on these movies when women are depicted this way, explicitly sexual, but also emotionally very unstable to the point of violence, self-harm, attempted murder sometimes. If we take that reading as something that's misogynistic, that's highly reductive, that reduces, oh well, if she's highly sexual, she's probably emotionally unhinged, I reject that. As the individual spectator, as the consumer, I reject that reading. If you want to take that reading, best of luck to you, but you haven't engaged your brain. Now, the one thing I was going to say, which the point I did actually, sorry, there was a point I wanted to make. I was watching Betty Blue the other night, and I was trying to think, well, what if a woman is watching this? And if you're a woman, you're going, oh my God, is this where we are? Is this what we're being presented with again and again and again? Now, I can switch my brain and go, okay, I can see that, but I don't know. I suppose the question is that the ongoing representation of women in film and in other aspects of life, and certainly other aspects of popular culture? I mean, I've spoken about this before. Objectification, the presentation of the female form, the sexualized female form. It's pretty relentless at times, but I don't know. I think, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm aware of the power of the messaging, but I do think that there are other ways and other opportunities and other images out there in terms of representation and representation of female identity and agency that are not merely caught up in the paradigm of sexuality and sexual desirability. And I don't know, I wrote a short story a couple of years ago, and it was simply a story about a woman who was dealing with the grief of failing to hold on to a pregnancy, and it was trying to get into her internal world and give expression to the full depth of her grief, of her sadness, of her anger, of her sense of futility. I think it was quite effective myself, but I did have one friend, a female friend, respond to it and go, not all women are like that. And she was saying, like, I didn't feel that way about not having kids. And I was like, okay, fine, fair enough. But I also was like, I'm not for a millisecond suggesting that all women are like this. It's one character in one little story that I concocted in my little brain and produced, because I was interested in exploring that one character's experience, and I chose to present it that way. So I often view characters, male, female, or otherwise, whatever, that way. Take the individual story. It doesn't necessarily, it doesn't at all often represent the whole. It's one part. It's one individual's experience, and I think that's a bit of that's relevant. Like there's an applicability there to to identity politics and the culture wars and cancel culture and woke thinking nowadays, where we take everything that's representative of the whole and blow it up and make it the absolute truth for the absolute experience of all. And it is, and I've been consistent on this, it's colossally stupid, unthinking, unnuanced, unreflective, and lazy in the extreme, to not go, well, okay, that might be your experience, and I'm not for a second going to invalidate your experience, but there's something wrong where the individual or certain individuals feel that their experience needs to be the representative experience, and that everyone has to make a shape to accommodate that as the new orthodoxy. That's no good, and that is not going to help us. We need excuse me, I found a quote just earlier today. Let me quickly dig it out, and that's what I'm going to conclude with in today's episode. It's been so nice to be speaking. There's Ruby having a yawn. The quote was doing. The greatest threat to freedom is the absence of criticism. And that is a quote from, I believe it would be pronounced Vol Soyinka, playwright, poet, Nobel laureate, born 1934. Still alive and doing well, evidently. So the greatest threat to freedom is the absence of criticism. Yeah, boom. We must retain our critical thinking. We must retain our critical voices. And all you've been listening to is one guy's critical voice. Even talking about those two movies, it's not the last word. It's just my word. Take it or leave it. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and you got something out of it, and you stop for a millisecond and think, could I put a price on this experience? You can do just that. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/theclearout, where you could become a regular contributor of a very small amount of money to this show to help keep it going. And I would be enormously grateful for that. I'm talking 4 or 5 euros a month, maybe. Kitten, get away from my ankles. You could also use the supporter link, which you'll find wherever you're listening to this podcast. And with the supporter link, you can make a one-time donation of any amount, as large as you want, to support the show, or the tell, as I like to call it. And that would be brilliant. And if you don't have the money, or you can't be arsed, don't worry about it. I listen to loads of podcasts for free. It's great, but some I pay for. So there you go. That's it. That's my appeal for your support. Otherwise, throw me some love on social media. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. You can find me at The Clear Out Podcast. Twitter, The Clear Out 2. You can email me at theclearoutlive@gmail.com. And I would welcome all contributions, comments, responses, reactions. It's all good. It's all part of the experience. It's all part of building this thing. So yeah, great stuff. Listen, thanks again for any of you who reached out with feedback for the Aisling Cregan episodes, the Pebble Girl. Really appreciate some of that feedback I've received. There will be more interviews coming. My lovely wife will come on the show at some point soon to talk about music therapy and her music career and what music means to her, and her music therapy business, which is up and running. I'm also going to have on the show in the near future the artist and sculptor and creative man, Mr. Alan Clark. So lots of cool things coming up, and I look forward to sharing them with you. Okay. Mind yourselves. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. Go and watch Vertigo. Go and watch Betty Blue. See what you think. Let me know. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
Inside.